This meeting is now being recorded.
Our speaker today is Olivier Guita. Olivier is a geopolitical risk and security expert with a regional specialization on the Middle East and North Africa. Olivier is going to address the current situation regarding ISIS, Iraq, Syria, Libya, and other very hot spots in that region. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Olivier.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for having me on the call. Thanks to Peters, thanks to ASIS, and I'm going to try to get you as much as possible analysis for the next 20 minutes or so about most of the countries in the region, and hopefully we'll have a good number of questions that I can answer in the 10 minutes remaining. What I would like to do is start up with a general overview and then look at the situation in different countries and how all these plays together and how everything is tied up. Because obviously since the Arab Spring of 2011, countries in the MENA region have experienced major changes and with the fall of the dictators, but unfortunately, terrorist groups have been expanding their operations, forging sophisticated cooperation networks behind state boundaries. And so we have an issue of porous borders with illicit weapons and narcotics trafficking, but also a fluid movement of terrorists that go from one country to another. Obviously, the general security picture in the region has very much degraded since 2011. I would put to you that the terrorist risk has spread now to countries such as Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Mali, obviously Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and to a lesser extent Morocco, Niger, Cameroon, and I'll talk briefly about Nigeria as well, because that's also one of the major countries we should be looking at. But last but not least, the issue of returning jihadists, both in Western Europe and in the U.S., is also something that is growing quickly. And as much as possible, I'll try to give you an insight about what's the behind the scenes of what's been happening. So let's start with Syria, Iraq, and the Islamic State. The tipping point happened last year, almost exactly a year ago, when in August Assad unleashed a chemical attack on the Ghouta neighborhood in Damascus. This was the red line that President Obama has spoken about, and everybody was expecting a strong reaction from the West. So I had the opportunity of briefing both the cabinet here in the UK, but also the members of parliament that were going to vote on the intervention in Syria back last year in August. A couple of the points that I made with the plus and the minuses about an intervention in Syria were pretty straightforward, but what I really try to convey is to put things in black and white as far as the dangers. So, I was very clear with both the cabinet and the MPs that if there wasn't going to be an intervention of some kind, even a symbolical one, let's say just bombing a palace from Assad and, going back, not boots on the ground, not a major airstrike, but something symbolical to keep our credibility alive, then it will have terrible repercussions for the West. The idea was that even if we were not going to intervene for, human rights reasons, for international law, I told the people that we should intervene out of selfishness, because right away I could guess that an army of jihadist recruits would go on forums and say, look, the West is not coming to our help, it's not saving our Muslim brothers in Syria, you have to go and fight. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen in the past year, and that's something security services are very concerned now a year after the fact, is the numbers of their citizens being now in Syria or Iraq fighting, and probably coming back down the road, and some of them could attack the homeland, so both in the U.S. and in Western Europe. And this is, I would tell you, this is the main issue that keeps our security services at night with their eyes open, and this is a nightmarish situation because we don't have a good handle on the people that are coming back and information about their whereabouts. So I'm going to move back to obviously Syria and Iraq, but I wanted to put this in context to relate also to the situation in the West. So, the decision of not intervening last year got a lot of people to join ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the official Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. And it's interesting that Al-Qaeda says through its leader Ayman al-Zawahiri that they had kicked out ISIS of AQ because they were too extreme. But I would put to you that this is very much something to be debated, because remember the years 2003 to 2006, Al-Qaeda in Iraq was known for extreme acts and beheadings as well. So the real reason behind it is pure ego, and back in November of last year, I got a hold of the letter that al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, wrote to Ayman al-Zawahiri, where he basically laid out the points that Zawahiri was not charismatic enough, he was not representing its vision, and that ISIS was going to go on its own. And right there you could tell that there was going to be a lot of trouble and a lot of people joining that new group. What's interesting as far as ISIS advances military in Iraq, if you look at what's been going on, the numbers are staggering. For instance, for the take of Mosul, that was one of the tipping points in the military campaign, ISIS had 800 quote-unquote soldiers in front of 20,000 soldiers of the Iraqi army. And it's, for a lot of people, incredible to think that 800 soldiers could take on 20,000 soldiers, but the reason being that a lot of the soldiers from the Iraqi army deserted, and also a lot of the Sunni soldiers decided not to fight against their own. And that's something that is going to have an impact in the long run, is this dichotomy and antagonization you have now between Sunni and Shias, not only in Iraq, but throughout the Arab world. And to give you an idea and something concrete, one of my friends was an Iraqi CSO back in Iraq, is a Sunni, very tolerant, that has been living in a mixed neighborhood of Baghdad for a long time. And I spoke to him just about a month ago, and he said, things have changed because my boy, who's 6 years old at school, has been mostly shunned by its Shia friends because of his belonging to the Sunni sects. And me, after living in this neighborhood of 30 years, I'm concerned that my Shia neighbor might come up and kill me at night. And that's how crazy the situation has gone, and this is really what's going to impact. And that's why you've seen the fact that a lot of Sunnis are getting to the side of ISIS, because they'd rather be on the ISIS side than on the Shia side. And that's the whole future, because obviously military operation is going to help, but it's not going to be the solution. After all is said and done, people are going to go back to trying to living together. And I would put to you that we are far past this stage. The Kurds are very much on, their way to independence, and the hard work, and I would say that ironically, that Maliki has undertaken to shun the Sunni has really worked marvels, and it's going to be very tough even for the West to get the Sunni and the Shias to agree on anything going forward. And that's what makes me very pessimistic about the whole situation in Iraq, and that's what I think we might be going towards a breakup of the country, and that's something that you guys will have to look at in the near future. So let me get back to the larger context, the Sunni-Shia war, because that's what it's all about, and that's what's really driving the violence. Even though a lot of analysts and people are saying ISIS is going to target the West, it's for our own national security that we are intervening and having those attacks against targets in Iraq. But if you look at ISIS and what they've been doing and what their narrative is, their main enemy is not the U.S., it's not Britain, it's not France, it's not even Israel, it's actually Iran. And that's where everything gets more complicated. Because at this point, ISIS has a much more localized view of the conflict, and they're a very focused bunch. They want to get Syria and Iraq under control, which I'm not sure they'll get military, but that's what they want to do, then get to Lebanon, and then the big price is hitting at Iran. The results are, as of now, ISIS is the only group that has been able to successfully attack Iran's proxy in Lebanon, i.e. Hezbollah. Indeed, for 30-odd years, Hezbollah didn't get any attack in Beirut, and now in just a year, ISIS has been successful 4 times to hit Hezbollah and also to hit the Iranian embassy in Beirut as well. And so that's one of the reasons, but for them the next step is to attack Iran on its own soil, and that would be a game changer if this happens. Looking at this, if there's this war going on, are we seen as a neutral player or not? And I would put to you that, if you don't intervene in Syria, in a way, you don't intervene in Iraq. Because right there, even if, the idea was to save the Yazidi community in Iraq, a lot of people in the Sunni camp are saying that basically the U.S. is siding with Iran, with Syria, and siding with the Shias, and have decided that they are supporting the Shia side. And that's something that is very problematic with a lot of our allies in the Gulf, especially the Saudis and the Emiratis, but also regarding what I mentioned to you earlier on with the returning jihadists that are all Sunnis. And this could have an impact if we're being seen as a friend of the enemy. And that's something to keep in mind. 2 players that a lot of people are not talking about that have, a lot of clout on how this situation in both Syria and Iraq could unravel. And those 2 players are Turkey and Qatar. Because we talked about the Sunni-Shia war, but there's actually a Qatar-Saudi war, which has been going on for the past 20 years, whereby Qatar and Saudi, even though they are both Sunni states, even though they're both extremes, they are competing for the crown, if you will. And Qatar has been supporting groups close to ISIS for a long while. They've been supporting groups such as AQIM, Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb, in Mali, And so it is something that we in the West should look at and try to do anything we can to stop the flow of money to those groups. But also at the same time, when I'm asked by a lot of security analysts, but also people within governments, what can be done to just stop the flow of jihadis going to Syria? I said, you can come up with a lot of legal measures, but the crux of the issue is Turkey. Turkey has been aiding and abetting Western recruits to go into Syria because they want to destabilize Syria, and it's been part of their policy. 2 years after the fact, we're just waking up to this, but there is a clear solution of putting the pressure on Turkey to stop and close the borders where all those Westerners are crossing. And I would put to you that's something to keep in the back of your head. Moving on to Syria, obviously the fact that now both Iran and Hezbollah have been moving soldiers and operatives to Iraq is changing the book as far as the military situation. ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra are having much more of an impact now in Syria, than they had before, because they are facing less of a formidable enemy. And so the question is and remains, if the U.S. plan down the road, which seems to be likely to one way or another intervene in Syria and de facto propping up Assad, then that could be his way out, because otherwise the military situation in the long run is going against Assad. And that's something that is going to have an impact as well on neighboring Lebanon, where political violence has been going on since 1975, but things have potentially an impact of escalating on that issue, and I'm sure you've seen that Lebanese soldiers have been taken hostages by ISIS, and 2 of them have been beheaded already. So after ISIS and Iraq and Syria, I'm going to move on what I think is really the next Iraq, and the country that I'm from far the most concerned about. It's Libya. Because in Libya, as in Iraq, jihadists today have control of a large portion of the country. It used to be just the south, where groups such as Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and also Al-Murabitun, which is the group headed by Mokhtar Bel-Mokhtar, one of the most sought-after terrorists in the world. Mokhtar was behind the attack on the Algerian oil and gas facility in Amenas at the beginning of January 2013, where 39 people died, and where that was Mokhtar's doing. So the South has been for a long time quite worrisome. But also now there are competing groups. Ansar al-Sharia, another group that is very strong in Benghazi and other areas, have taken control of some areas and have access to money. Also, as you have seen in the past 2 weeks, Tripoli airport has fallen to the hands of the jihadists mostly. And so it's interesting that everybody in the region is getting ready for something bad coming from Libya. So let me tell you what happened. On August 16, allegedly the CIA provided Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia with credible intel that Libyan terrorists would try to fly planes into buildings in a redux of the September 11 attacks. Probably also using the anniversary date coming up to try to do such an operation. Within 24 hours, those countries started massively preparing themselves for a potential attack. So, for instance, Morocco mobilized 70,000 soldiers and started putting anti-aircraft missile batteries in residential area near the airport in Casablanca, in Marrakesh, in Tangiers, and also near strategic sites. The Algerians also that have been very active in Libya and know the danger of jihadism quite well, have also beefed up security near their borders. And Tunisia, for the first time, has been flying fighter jets along the border with Libya. This shows how a failed state like Libya can have a huge impact, because the problem with Libya, as with other countries, is that we are facing a multiple-headed enemy. Things were simple when we just had to fight Al-Qaeda. That was just one group. Now, like in the corporate world, unfortunately, there's been a lot of spin-offs, and so for me, in North Africa, instead of following just one group, I have to follow now 5 or 6 terrorist groups, and that's really one thing that is really worrisome, is the multiplication of different terror groups that could be attacking targets. And so to go into, because I'm running already out of time, to go into literally what I see as predictions and what you guys would see as happening and could have an impact on corporations. The first big trend that I've been underlining for the past 10 years is kidnap for ransom. This has been the best business deal for Al-Qaeda and Islamic Maghreb. This hostage-taking economy, if you will, has provided over $150 million from ransom paid by different countries. And this has triggered, obviously, the envy of a lot of other groups. And this is not going to stop. Obviously, in Iraq, Britain and the U.S. do not want to pay for the release of their hostages, but the French have paid, and the Italians have paid, and most Western European countries are still paying. And if it's not governments, it's actually corporations that are paying for that. And two countries that this could have an impact. One is Nigeria, that has obviously a large oil-related economy, has a lot of expats, and for the time being, Boko Haram has been really focused on the northeast and sometimes on Abuja, the capital, and not being able to pull off attacks in Lagos and against oil facilities. But I would predict that this is going to change in the run-up to the 2015 elections in Nigeria, and that Boko will try to pull off terror attacks and possibly kidnappings of oil executives or expats to basically garner not just more money but more media exposure. So that's the first big trend that I see as far as the impact on the corporate world. The second big thing that is problematic also, and we don't think about, is for Europe and the West and the US as well. I would put to you that Al-Qaeda, as of now, is still our main threat. It's not ISIS. ISIS has, for the time being, no interest, no sales in Europe or the US to pull off terror attacks. They're a very localized group. Al-Qaeda is a very global group, and they will try to attack targets in just a large fashion, like they did on September 11, or they did at the July the July 7 in London. This kind of attack are still very much into the minds of AQ, and especially now because it's, weirdly enough, it's competition between terror groups. They are trying to get the upper hand on ISIS. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop here. I had wanted to get you much more analysis on other countries, but unfortunately time has run out. But I'm open for your questions.
Olivier, this is Peter, and I'm very happy to let you keep going. It feels like you've just been starting to scratch the surface. So if you'd like to talk for another 10 minutes or so, that's
yes.
absolutely fine. And the questions that come in, we'll just
perfect. Okay, very good. Great. So I'm going to look at quickly some of the countries that you guys might be interested, because they are very conducive to doing business. And it's interesting that when I get corporations to ask me about countries and outlook, especially in the UK, the first two countries that come to mind is Libya and Nigeria, because of the potential of those countries. Libya is obviously the big question mark, especially after the NATO intervention in 2011. But it is a failed state as of now. And the fact that neighboring countries are getting very much involved and trying to protect themselves is having an impact. You've seen the supposedly joint attack from the UAE and Egypt in Tripoli. Algerians, as I indicated a few months ago, have been going in and out of Libya with troops to fight the jihadists. Also, U.S. Special Forces have, in the January timeframe, been involved in the south to fight AQIM and Al-Murabitun. So there's been a lot of military behind the scene happening. One of my predictions is really that regarding Libya, it has the potential of becoming, the gold rush of the Middle East because of what can be done. I would put to you that now is not a good time to get in. Things are going to get much worse before they get better, but I think that military intervention from neighbors or from the West or from both is going to happen in the next 6 months. The situation cannot go on like this. The dangers are too great for both the West or the neighbors to just ignore a country like Libya in the hands of jihadists and with no government and with no one to call to get anything running. This will have an impact, obviously, in some countries that have a lot of foreign investment nearby. I'm talking about Egypt. Egypt, where obviously since the revolution, the security apparatus in Egypt has been degraded. There's been a lot more terrorism, especially in the Sinai Peninsula. The majority of the terrorist group are now linked to Al-Qaeda. Obviously, the Sinai gas pipeline, also which supplied Israel, is also facing increased threat from terrorists, and Egypt is also in the middle of that Sunni-Shia war, and namely also in the mix between Saudi and Qatar war through the Muslim Brotherhood, because Qatar was propping up the Muslim Brotherhood when they were in power, and Saudi have been very helpful to Al-Sisi since he took over. And this leads me also to talking a little bit about the Gulf and talking about Saudi Arabia and how risky the situation, even if it looks very stable from the outside, and Saudi looks like they can be immune to some of the security issues. I think it has a lot on its plate, because if you look at the potential
attacks and countries that could be behind security threats to Saudi, it's important to look at this. So, for instance, there are risks coming from Yemen, because we have not talked about Yemen, but Yemen is also one of the hotspots of terrorism as of today. It's a big AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, is the most active and the most sophisticated branches of Al-Qaeda in the world. Yemen is also, like Libya, a failed state in the making. And so there are risks coming from Yemen from both sides for Saudi. There is the Houthi rebellion. The Houthi are Shias living in Yemen that are being propped up by Iran and that have a vested interest in Saudi falling. And that puts also in perspective the second threat within Saudi that we don't mention enough is the Shia minority, mostly living in the eastern province. So 10% of Saudi population is Shia, and they live in the eastern province where 90% of the oil production is. And you see the calculation right there. There have been a lot of rebellion, a lot of movements, some terror attacks that have been really not reported in the Western media in the eastern province, and we all suspect that Iran has a hand in that, and so that could be the case. So they have threat from Yemen, from their own Shia minority, but also, last but not least, from ISIS. ISIS has mentioned that, and there's been some allegations that ISIS will try to attack Saudi Arabia during the Hajj pilgrimage, which starts at the beginning of October. So Saudi also is a place where everything looks calm from the outside, but that could be geared for, unfortunately, a very insecure year. So to quickly wrap up, things are going to get much, much, much worse before they get better in the whole region. I don't know how much of the West intervention is going to have an impact on the situation on the ground, depending on how credible or how committed the West is going to be. It looks like President Obama is going to present a 3-year plan for dealing with ISIS, basically leaving some of the heavy lifting for his successor. But in terms of security, in terms of corporate issues, don't forget, kidnap for ransom is going to go high. Also, whatever can be done to get media exposure, like the Al-Shabaab attack on the Westgate or the Mumbai attack, this will be also in the works. Grabbing the attention of the world media will be also something that people will look at. And unfortunately, the third one that is really, as I said, keeping the worst nightmare for our security services is the lone wolf returning from Syria and attacking targets, in Trafalgar Square or on Times Square without anyone knowing that they're coming. And that's also something that could cripple our economy if that happens on a large scale, unfortunately. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm open for questions if you have any.
Many thanks, Olivier. We do have a question coming in with regard actually to Mexico and its potentially porous border with the United States. Are there thoughts or rumors about Al-Qaeda or other terrorist members entering the United States via a porous border with Mexico?
That is a very good question, and that's the case. I mean, I have been doing some work on this issue, and believe it or not, Canada is more problematic than Mexico. But there's been cases of operatives coming through Mexico, not just AQ related, but also Hezbollah, because Hezbollah has a large presence in South America, namely in the tri-border area of Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina,
and Hezbollah has been using both Canada and Mexico to smuggle operatives. And remember, the Millennium Plot was actually concocted in Canada, and thanks to a very smart border guard officer, we got to foil the attack on the LAX airport for the Millennium.
Thanks, Olivier. And any thoughts about immediate and long-term impact on Western travelers in the Middle East and North Africa region, and then also other countries in the West that might be affected by fallout from the situation?
Yes. I mean, look at the issue, what happened during the Israel-Gaza war, where the airport was closed for a few days. Look, if that's the case, that there are going to be much more potential attacks in the wake of that latest terror alert from North Africa, whereby jihadists are in control of planes and they would likely like to fly planes into buildings, it's going to have a large impact. I mean, the anti-aircraft missiles that the Moroccans have installed are only to shoot at civilian airplanes, not to shoot fighter jets. And if there's a threat, I suspect that the airport would be closed, and it will have a lot of impact and disruption. And also, the reason why this story has not really gotten the attention of people is because of the impact it could have on both the economies of North Africa, but also of Europe. This was, remember, mid-August. It's the high season for tourists from Western Europe to go into Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria, and there was no reason for anyone to advertise that this was in the works, because it would create panic and havoc, and you could have a lot of people deciding that they don't want to vacation there any longer. So North Africa is going to be an issue, but look, if Libya has planes and decides to go into Egypt, then Egypt is also one of the targets. It's not just North Africa. It will be interesting to see indeed what's going to happen with airline security and how they're going to get this issue going, because as you know, also, when the whole issue with the closing of the airports in Israel, a lot of the researchers found out that most of the commercial airlines fly over very dangerous zones, and also what we've seen through the Malaysian airlines downing in Ukraine. And so, you know, British Airways, Air France fly over Mosul, for instance. So this has already had an impact on companies and airlines changing also their patterns of flying, and it will definitely have a large impact, especially if you see a terror attack linked to planes. Then security is likely to be beefed up in a way that we haven't seen that coming.
Thank you, Olivier. One last question can you talk on Qatar? Can you talk a little bit about, and you have already, but what's the political future of that country look like? They've taken some steps and some political steps that put them in opposition to other big players in the region.
Right. Look, you're right. I mean, Qatar is one of the main, as of now, supporters, one way or another, through funding of terror groups around the world. So there's been, I think, already in Washington, some talk about clamping down on Qatar and getting them to get their act together about this. Obviously, there's been the whole controversy about Al Jazeera for the past 15 years or so, and that's also one of the mouthpieces of Qatar that is very problematic. But you are right. Both Qatar and Turkey are going to have to respond to a lot of the claims put forth by Western security services. Because down the road, it's all a matter of money, it's all a matter of getting the influence, getting the help, and there's no reason why we should go just after the individuals, but also going after the countries one way or another that facilitate those individuals to go in and probably come back either in Europe or the US and try to hit at the homeland.
Thanks again, Olivier. Listen, what we'll do is we'll just unmute everyone's line for the next minute or so. We haven't gotten any more questions come in via email, so if you have any last questions, we'll try to monitor and bring these in at one at a time, and if not, then we'll end the call. So if there are any questions, we'll ask Manuela to unmute the lines now.
All guests have been unmuted.
Folks, last chance for any questions with Olivier. If you have any, this is the time. Otherwise, we'll wrap up here. All right, Olivier, that's the 5-second rule. So,
that's all right.
It looks like you've hit everything everyone wants to hit. I think that we've got some follow-up information from you that's available or will be available on the CSO Roundtable website that you've forwarded to us.
Yes, and if anyone has any question, please, I'll provide my contact information to Peter, and do not hesitate to call me or email me if you have any further questions.
That's very much appreciated, Olivier, and we look forward to having you back for a future discussion and a follow-up on this region. It seems clear that there will be a lot of follow-up necessary. So on behalf of the CSO Roundtable of ASIS International, Olivier, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your expertise. We do look forward to talking to you again, and we'll wrap up the call there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.